Guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to look into today is on the notorious British serial killer, the Black Panther. The investigation to find out who the Black Panther was like this huge wild goose chase, and you will find out what I mean as we go through the case and the struggles that they went through to solve this case. Now, the man behind the Black Panther is actually called Donald Nielson. I'd just like to say I've got a Patreon for anybody that wants to support me over there as a request from you guys. I'd just like to let you know that I mean no disrespect to anyone I talk about. I've just gathered this information off the internet and compiled it into a video for educational purposes. Donald Nielson was actually born Donald Nappy on the 1st of August in 1936 in Bradford, England. At the age of 10, Donald's mother passed away. She was only 33 years old at the time, and it was due to breast cancer. He really didn't have a happy childhood. He was bullied a lot, and that was because of his name and its resemblance to a baby's nappy. Kids can be cruel, and he got a lot of abuse for that. In 1948, he was caught breaking into a shop, and he just got a warning for that. He just kind of got a slap on the wrist. He then went on eventually to meet a woman called Irene Tate, who was 2 years older than him. Donald was in the army serving as a serviceman, and after meeting Irene, she really tried to convince him to kind of leave and come out of that job. In April of 1955, they decided that they were going to get married. He was 18 and she was 20. In 1960, they expanded their family and they went on to have a daughter who they called Catherine. When she reached the age of 4, Donald decided that he was going to change the family name. He didn't want his daughter to suffer through the abuse and the cruelty that he got when he was a kid over the name Nappy, and so he changed it to Nielson. Apparently he got the name from he bought a taxi business from someone, and that man's name was Nielson, and that is where the name came from. Donald began his criminal activities with burglaries. He actually committed over 400 house burglaries without even being caught, without detection. Nobody knew that it was him. Before he was known as the Black Panther, he was known also as the Phantom and Handy Andy. He was quite smart in the sense where he would kind of do one thing for a while so that the police would get used to that one thing, and then he would change it up to confuse them. So say he would steal a radio from every single house that he robbed, and then he would toss it. And when the police began to expect that of him, he stopped that and he changed to something else. Now, what he was getting from these houses wasn't a ton of money. You know, generally people don't have a lot of money hidden in their house. On one occasion, he robbed a house in Cheshire from which he had taken guns and ammo, and he then decided he was going to think a bit bigger and go on to rob post offices. Between the years of 1971 and 1974, he had committed 18 of those crimes. Let me just say here, none of this was tied into Donald for years, and he managed to evade the police for so long. Nobody knew that it was him. He was never on any records, and they never tied it into him. In February of 1972, he broke into a sub post office in the middle of the night, which was actually inside a private home on Rochdale Road. Leslie Richardson was the postmaster there. Him and his wife were asleep when the hooded man came into their bedroom. They woke up and saw this man, and I can't even imagine how frightened and terrified they must have been to wake up and see somebody there in a hood standing at the bottom of your bed. It must have been terrifying. Leslie jumped up though really quickly. He tried to tackle this man while his wife went and phoned the police. During the struggle, Donald went to show Leslie the shotgun that he had and shouted at him in a fake West Indian accent, "This is loaded." Leslie said the gun was actually pointed upwards, so he wasn't really worried about anyone accidentally being shot or himself being shot. Before he said, "We'll find out if it's loaded," and he pulled the trigger himself, blasting 2 holes in his ceiling. The gun was loaded. The fight continued, and Leslie actually managed to pull off Donald's hood. Donald stamped on his feet, breaking several of his toes and kneed him in the groin. As Leslie was crumpled on the floor, Donald made a run for it. He knew the police were on the way. He knew that he had to get out of there if he wanted any chance of escaping, and so he just did. He ran. So he left that house without actually having stolen anything because they fought back. Leslie gave the police a description of the man that he'd seen, which turned out to be very inaccurate in many respects, and that's probably one of the reasons as to why they never cottoned on it was him. There were also several other photo fits done of from other people, which also were not helpful in the investigation. As you can see, Donald is escalating, and he actually turns murderous in 1974 when he kills 3 people. He was robbing a post office when he shot dead 2 sub-postmasters and the husband of a sub-postmistress. He also violently attacked another sub-postmistress, Margaret Grayland. It was like the seal was broken and he just wasn't afraid to go that far, like to take somebody's life. Donald Skepper in Harrogate in the February, Derek Austin of Braxton in September, and Sidney Grayland in Langley. That was in November. It was actually the murder of Derek Austin which gave him his name, the Black Panther. His wife Marion was doing an interview with TV, and she said that her husband's killer was so quick, like a panther. And also the black clothing that he was wearing kind of attributed to it. At the end of the interview, the reporter says, "Where is a Black Panther now?" And that just kind of stuck with him from there onwards. The cases weren't initially linked, but he shot a security guard 6 times, Gerald Smith, and those bullets that were recovered from him were found to be the same bullets that were used in the murders of Derek and Sidney, and that is how it was linked eventually. So let me take you to 1975 in Shropshire, England, where we meet a 17-year-old girl called Leslie Whittle. She was born in 1957 to parents Dorothy and George Whittle. George Whittle was a very wealthy man. He owned this coach company, Whittle Coaches, and they were very rich from that. So Leslie grew up in this really big house. She had a great childhood, and she was known as an heiress because of how wealthy they were. In 1975, she attended Wolfram College. She was just this lovely, friendly, fun-loving, down-to-earth girl, and she was said to have an unbreakable bond with the mother. Her father, unfortunately, had passed away 5 years before this, but he did leave his entire fortune to Dorothy and her children, Ronald and Leslie. Let me just say here as well, Donald and Dorothy weren't actually married, and that kind of caused a problem because he was actually married to a woman called Selena who they had separated, but they weren't divorced. They were still married. And because he'd left his 3 estates to Dorothy and all of this money to the children, she wasn't happy about it. I believe Leslie got £82,000, and Ronald, I don't know how much he got because I couldn't find it, but probably, if not the same amount, a very similar amount. Because she wasn't happy about that, Selena decided that she was gonna, go forward with some legal proceedings to try and get the estate back, because she felt like she was married to him, that it should be hers and not be left to Dorothy and the children. Donald heard about all of this because it was a big controversy. It was all in the media, and that is where he heard of it, and he began his elaborate plan, which he planned for 3 years before he acted on it, because he wanted a piece of that money. On the 14th of January in 1975, at 1:30 a.m, Dorothy came in to check on Leslie, who was asleep in bed. Dorothy had been out, I don't know, drinking or something like that. She'd been out on the night out. And she came back, checked on her daughter, took a sleeping pill because her daughter was fine in bed, and went to sleep. The next morning she gets up, she's roaming around downstairs, and Leslie has yet to come down. So she goes up to find out what's going on. She's just being lazy. Why is she not come down yet? And when she opens the door, Leslie isn't there. Her clothes for that day, what were already lined up, were still there and had not been put on, so it's not like she'd got, put them on and gone out early. So she was worried, and then she finds a ransom note. This ransom note demanded £50,000. It said to not call the police. She was to wait for a call at Swan Shopping Centre between 6 p.m. and 1 a.m, which is a huge time gap, really, when you think about it. She was supposed to take the call, give her name, do not involve the police whatsoever, or Leslie would die. So she tries to call Ronald, but realises the phone lines have been cut. She goes and picks Ronald up, she brings him back, and they find another ransom note in a Turkish delight box in the living room. After finding 2 notes and no Leslie, Ronald decided to call the police, even though the note told them not to. Detective Chief Superintendent Bob Booth was on the case, and he had solved 70 cases, so he was like the man to have on the case. He had done 70 cases and he'd solved them all. He was ready for this case. As soon as he saw the note, he went and withdrew the money from the bank account of the family, the Whittle family, and he photocopied every single one so that they could be tracked. So if they were ever spent anywhere, they would know about it, they would be able to track them, and he spent a long time doing that. So Ronald goes to the shopping centre, ready to wait for this call, and the police are close by to keep an eye on things. The problem was that there wasn't supposed to be any police. They weren't supposed to know about it, and the media had actually got hold of information on it, and it was just all out there. So it was all over the media, and the person that did this, Donald, which they didn't know at the time, would have known that it was all out there, that everyone pretty much knew about it when nobody was supposed to know about it. Bob had done this elaborate plan, but he had not thought about doing a media blackout, and then it was leaked. So this phone call does eventually come through at midnight, but no one is there to answer it because one of the officers that Bob had left in charge there said, oh, no one's going to call because it's all out in the media, let's go home. Now, how devastating is that this call did come through and Ronald wasn't there to answer it because some policemen decided that they wouldn't call, but they still did, and that's just awful. The next day, 250 investigators and reporters were all out looking for information on this. Ronald wasn't ready to give up. He found out that there had been a phone call, and he was furious, rightly so. So he goes back down to the phone booth, and he waits there for hours, hoping that they will call again. Eventually, the media turn up, they've got wind of it again, they're there taking pictures and stuff, and he's forced to leave because of it. On the 16th of January, they receive a call inside their own residence, and it's Leslie's voice, having been tape recorded and played down the phone. And on it, she said, Mum, you need to go to Kids Grove Post Office telephone box. The instructions are inside. I'm okay, but there are to be no police, no tricks, okay? So Ronald agreed to go the 75 miles on the 17th. He left the police station with a transmitter. He didn't know where he was going, and he turned up an hour late because of that. And then when he gets in this phone box, he's looking around for more instructions and he can't find them. It takes him about half an hour to eventually find the tape. This tape told him to go to Bathpool Park, which was about a mile away. The note said, go to the top of the land and turn into no entry. Go to the wall and flashlight. Look for torchlight, run to torch, further instructions on torch. Ronald did it. Nobody seemed to be there, nothing seemed to happen. He began shouting just to see whether there was anybody there, to try and let them know that he was there. He was ready and waiting to do what he was told next for his sister. But for an hour, nothing happened. He just sat there waiting and waiting till it eventually was called up. A couple in the area did actually say that later on they saw a police patrol car driving by. It wasn't anything to do with Bob. It was the local police, I believe. And it was all just coincidental. Bob hadn't even arranged that to happen, but it was thought that maybe that had spooked him. Bob sent out investigators to kind of quietly and very discreetly search the area to see if they could find anything, in the hopes that this person still wouldn't know that the police were involved. After days of discreetly looking, they didn't find anything. This is when they decided to turn to the media to just lay it all out there, because at this point the media had kind of been their enemy, and now they were turning to it to help them because this kidnapper was not showing any signs of leading any more information. They weren't ringing anymore, and so they just thought that if they put it all out there, maybe the public or the media can help. Her family went on and did pleas, obviously, for a safe return. A week later, they find this abandoned car that had been sat there since the first kind of ransom drop was supposed to happen. It was just 300 yards away from the security guard, Gerald Smith, who had been shot 6 times. He was recovering from his injuries, and at the time, they didn't realise that this could have been the reason for the delayed phone call. It took them 8 days to realise that when they searched the car. This was where the case was linked, because inside, they found a roll of plastic tape, slippers, and a cassette. They played the tape and it was Leslie speaking. They had missed a vital clue, and in the tape she said, Mum, go onto the M6 North Junction 10 and onto the A454 towards Warsaw. Instructions are taped under the shelf of the telephone box. There's no need to worry, Mum, I'm okay. I got a bit wet, but I'm quite dry now. I'm being treated very well, okay? There were also 4 envelopes with ransom notes inside, and it led kind of down this route, which Bob followed. They thought it was meant for Ronald for when he'd received the call. Another note was found on a lamppost which said, cross under car park to gate 8 to Deadly Zoo, which is actually where Gerald was shot, leading them to believe that he was shot by Leslie's abductor. This was very bad because the bullets in Gerald matched that of the notorious serial killer, the Black Panther, which again, at the time, they didn't know this was Donald, but of course, you guys do. 1 month passes by and they are still no closer to finding his identity. Ronald had let it slip that he was actually attending a ransom drop, which police had to pretend that they didn't know about, but that then gave them an excuse to thoroughly search the area, which before they hadn't been able to do properly because of course they were doing it on the down low. Whilst doing this, they find another tape which tells them to drop the suitcase in the hole. They also found a torch near a drain. A few weeks later, after searching the park once more, they concentrate more on the drains and they load themselves down into them. And that is where they found a tape machine, some tapes, and they went further down. And as they got kind of down to the bottom, they found a tape recorder. These drains kind of led to tunnels, which is how they assumed that he was getting around. At another drain, they found a leather jacket and some binoculars, so they went inside of that one, and it was 60 foot deep. So they go in 60 foot deep into this drain, and they find a mattress and some blankets, a foam mattress and some blankets, along with a sleeping bag. And there, hanging from steel wires 7 inches from the ground, they find the body of Leslie Whittle. She was found on the 7th of March in 1975. They sent her body off for post-mortem and found that she hadn't actually died from strangulation, but from something called vagal inhibition, which is where the vagus nerve, part of your nervous system, which has control over your heart, lung and digestive system, along with another few things. And the pressure placed on that nerve had caused her heart to stop. Some analysts thought that it was possible that the Black Panther had pushed Leslie off the ledge where he had kept her. And an alternative scenario is that he wasn't even there when she died, that he had panicked and fled that night, that he had, that everything had failed, thinking that the police were onto him. And then Leslie, who was living down there in the dark without anything, after a very long time, she accidentally fell to her death. Pathologists noted that Leslie only weighed 98 pounds. So she had lost a ton of weight and concluded that she hadn't eaten for at least 3 days. Now, it takes 3 days for your body to fully pass through all food throughout your entire body. So it could have even been longer than that. Out of all the items that they recovered, they found one item had a partial fingerprint on it, and they ran that through the database and it didn't match anyone. It would be the next year before they finally got a break and finally discovered who the Black Panther was. In December of 1975, 2 officers were going out to speak to a man that had been reported as acting suspicious. So they go to this man and they roll down the window. As they're about to speak to him, he pulls out a sawn-off shotgun, shoves it in the face. He then gets in the car, he sticks it in one of the officers' sides and tells them to drive. He also asked them if they had any rope. So the officers drive out. They're heading kind of out of town and out into the middle of nowhere on the path that he's taking them. So they begin to worry because once they get out there, they're going to be defenseless. There's going to be no way of getting any help. So they have to think fast. So what the officer driving does is he begins to swerve left and right. And it's kind of just to confuse him. And if you're swerving left and right, if you imagine the gun is going to be kind of swinging and he's going to be being swung all over the place. And so he goes, which way do you want it to go? Left or right? And it's just to try and confuse him enough so that they can then slam on the brakes, which they do, and they stop outside of a fish and chip shop. Now, this person inside who's just, casually ordering his food, sees all this going on, runs outside to try and help, and he grabs the man's wrists while the officers tackle him, and they manage to arrest him between the 3 of them. I bet that man was very shocked after he's just ordering his fish and chips when that scene all unfolded outside. This man didn't speak for 2 days, but he eventually gave his name as you well know, Donald Nielson. They searched his house and geez, did they find a lot of stuff. In his attic he had masks, he had guns, he had ammo, knives, gloves, there were loads of stuff, but along with it they found a sculpture of a Black Panther. He really had embraced his nickname. They interrogated him about Leslie's murder, and he just kind of stared at the wall, counting the bricks, for ages before he would respond. It was really weird, but then suddenly he changed his tactic and said to him, I'll give you statements for all the murders I've committed so they can be separate and it can be easier for you. How thoughtful of him. His fingerprint went on to match the partial that they had, and he wrote an 18-page confession to Leslie's murder where he said that he had gotten spooked that night. He went back to gather his things and accidentally knocked Leslie off the ledge, killing her. In July 1976, Donald was sentenced and convicted for Leslie Whittle's murder, and he was sentenced to life. 3 weeks later, he got convicted of the others. He was given 5 life sentences with another 61 years. 21 years for Leslie's kidnap, 10 for blackmailing her mother, and 3 lots of 10 for 2 counts of burglary and possessing a shotgun with the intent to endanger life. No charges were actually brought for the murder of Gerald Smith because Gerald actually didn't die until 1 year and 1 day after he had been shot by Donald. Donald went on to appeal his sentence in 2008 but was denied. In the early hours of the 17th of December in 2011, Donald began suffering from breathing difficulties and was rushed from prison to hospital. He died the next day on the 18th at the age of 75. So that is the end of the case, but like I said, it was like a huge wild goose chase. They had all these clues and go here and do that and go here and do that and all these tapes. It was a bit insane, really. I'm so thankful that they did eventually catch him though, because he was free for a year, you know. It was only because they've seen this man acting suspiciously that they went and approached him, and even then, he pulled out a gun and he had it on the officers, and if they didn't think quickly, you know, we might have taken them out and killed them and then carried on his spree for many, many years to come. Who knows? My heart goes out to all of the families that he destroyed on his killing spree. But yeah, that is the end of the case. Give me a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like this content. Anyway guys, that's all I have today on the case of the Black Panther, Donald Nielson. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.